Welcome back to the best ever PC benchmark channel. Is the RTX 3090 still enough in 2025 to tackle a modern beast like Black Myth Wukong? Let's find out. The game is powered by Unreal Engine 5, packed with cutting-edge visuals, and I'm testing it at 1080p and 1440p using the AMD Ryzen 7 9800X 3D and RTX 3090, both running at stock. Capture and analysis handled via Capframe X and Riva Tuner. Like, comment, and subscribe for deep dive benchmarks. Now let's jump in. Let's start at 1080p. All upscalers in Black Myth Wukong are always on, so I tested each one across cinematic, high, and low settings. DLSS at 1080p. Cinematic preset. Starting with DLSS at the cinematic preset, you're looking at a consistent frame rate between 60 and 70 FPS. This setting cranks up all the advanced visual effects: rich shadows, complex lighting, volumetric fog, and detailed particle effects, which can be very demanding on the GPU. Despite this, DLSS leverages its AI-powered reconstruction to deliver incredibly sharp visuals. Character models maintain fine details like individual strands of hair, intricate armor textures, and realistic facial expressions without noticeable aliasing or blurring. Motion remains fluid and stable even during intense combat sequences or quick camera pans, making every strike and dodge feel smooth and responsive. On the RTX 3090, frame pacing is very stable here, so you won't experience micro stutters or hitching, which is crucial for an immersive experience in a story-driven game like Black Myth Wukong. High preset. Dropping down to the high preset, DLSS performance improves substantially, with frame rates climbing to 100 to 120 FPS. Here, some of the heaviest visual effects are dialed back, but the overall image quality remains excellent. DLSS continues to provide crisp edges and sharp textures, balancing clarity with responsiveness. The increased FPS range allows for more responsive controls and smoother animations during fast-paced boss fights or exploration segments. This setting is perfect if you want a gameplay experience that looks gorgeous but feels highly fluid and reactive. You can really appreciate the game's detailed environments and character designs without compromising on smoothness, making high preset with DLSS a strong choice for most players. Low preset. At the low preset, the RTX 3090 truly flexes its muscle, pushing frame rates between 160 and 180 FPS with DLSS engaged. This setting minimizes resource-heavy effects to maximize performance. Despite this, DLSS manages to retain excellent image clarity, avoiding the softness often seen with less sophisticated upscaling. The gameplay here is ultra-smooth, with near-perfect frame pacing and no visible input lag, ideal for competitive players who prioritize performance and responsiveness. Even though the visual fidelity drops compared to higher presets, the game still looks very clean and polished thanks to DLSS's AI reconstruction. This high frame rate range supports high refresh rate monitors beautifully, making every action crisp and satisfying. TSR, Epic's Temporal Super Resolution, performance at 1080p, cinematic preset. Using Epic's native Temporal Super Resolution, or TSR, at the cinematic preset, the RTX 3090 delivers a solid 40 to 60 FPS range. TSR is designed specifically for Unreal Engine 5 games like Black Myth Wukong, making it a natural choice if you want upscaling built directly into the engine without relying on proprietary AI like DLSS. Visually, TSR holds up well, preserving much of the detail in the richly crafted environments and character models. You'll see detailed textures on Wukong's armor and the lush foliage of the game's forests with minimal softening. However, TSR's temporal nature means it reconstructs frames using data from previous ones, which can sometimes cause ghosting effects during fast motion, like quick swings of Wukong's staff or rapid camera pans. This ghosting shows as faint trailing images or blurs, which might be noticeable during hectic combat sequences, but generally doesn't distract from the overall experience. High preset. At the high preset, TSR improves frame rates considerably, ranging from 80 to 100 FPS. This setting trims some of the heavier post-processing effects and volumetric details, but maintains a very good balance between visual fidelity and smooth gameplay. The image stays crisp with good anti-aliasing, and the ghosting artifacts become less obvious, although they don't disappear entirely. For players who want solid performance without sacrificing too much visual quality, TSR on high is an excellent middle ground. Combat feels fluid, and the world remains richly detailed, making it easier to appreciate the intricate level design and fluid animations without any jarring visual distractions. Low preset. Dropping to the low preset, TSR really shines in terms of raw performance, reaching 170 to 190 frames per second. This frame rate is extremely stable and responsive, with no noticeable stutters or input lag. Although the visuals lose some of the cinematic flair, lighting effects and shadow details are scaled back. The upscaling maintains a clean and stable image. Ghosting artifacts are further reduced at this setting, making fast-paced action sequences feel tighter and more precise. This is the go-to setup if you prioritize competitive gameplay or have a high refresh rate monitor that benefits from these high frame rates. TSR's efficient temporal algorithm keeps everything smooth, ensuring you can fully enjoy Black Myth Wukong's dynamic combat without compromise. NXSR, new experimental super resolution by Game Science, performance at 1080p. Cinematic preset, starting with NXSR at the cinematic preset. The RTX 3090 delivers a smooth 50 to 60 FPS performance. NXSR, developed by Game Science specifically for Black Myth Wukong, is an experimental super resolution technique that combines spatial and temporal methods to reconstruct the image. The overall image quality here is quite comparable to Epic's TSR, but it pulls ahead slightly in terms of anti-aliasing performance. Edges are smoother, and the usual jagged lines on character models and environmental assets are noticeably reduced. The dense foliage, intricate weapon details, and particle effects maintain a good level of crispness, though it can sometimes appear a bit softer than DLSS. Fast action sequences are handled well, with motion staying fluid and artifacts kept to a minimum. While NXSR is still in its early stages compared to more mature solutions like DLSS or UPSCALERS, it's a promising built-in alternative that performs admirably for those playing the game on PC. High preset. On the high preset, NXSR averages around 90 FPS, showcasing the RTX 3090's ability to deliver strong performance while keeping image quality high. The visual fidelity remains solid, with better edge smoothing than TSR at this level. Details like the textures on Wukong's robes and the sharpness of in-game text remain clear and legible. The frame rate boost compared to cinematic provides smoother gameplay, especially during fast-paced combat and traversal through sprawling environments. NXSR's blend of spatial and temporal anti-aliasing ensures minimal shimmering or flickering effects, making for a more polished look overall. Low preset. When set to low, NXSR really lets the RTX 3090 stretch its legs, peaking at around 170 FPS in open environments. This high frame rate offers ultra-responsive gameplay, perfect for competitive play or for those with high refresh rate monitors. The image remains impressively stable and detailed, with minimal aliasing artifacts despite the lower preset. Open areas with lots of environmental detail, such as forests or rocky terrains, show good clarity without significant softness creeping in. The balance between speed and visual quality here is excellent, making NXSR at low a strong option for players who want to maximize performance without sacrificing too much detail. FSR, Fidelity FX Super Resolution, performance at 1080p. Cinematic preset. Starting with AMD's Fidelity FX Super Resolution, or FSR, at the cinematic preset, the RTX 3090 manages frame rates between 50 and 70 FPS. FSR is an open-source spatial upscaling technology designed for wide compatibility across GPUs, including NVIDIA hardware, but it doesn't rely on AI like DLSS or XESS. As a result, image quality at cinematic is a bit softer and less detailed compared to DLSS or NXSR. Fine textures on character models and environmental elements appear slightly blurred, and edges don't have the same crispness. Despite this softness, FSR delivers a stable and consistent image with minimal shimmering or distracting artifacts. The gameplay remains smooth and visually pleasing, making FSR a solid option if you want decent upscaling without needing NVIDIA-specific features. The RTX 3090 keeps frame pacing steady here, which helps avoid stutters during intense combat or cinematic moments. High preset. Moving down to the high preset. FSR performance improves noticeably, averaging around 108 frames per second. The visual softness remains present, but becomes less distracting when gameplay speed increases. The image holds together well enough to enjoy Black Myth Wukong's lush environments and detailed character animations, although you'll lose some of the sharper details seen in DLSS or NXSR. This preset strikes a good balance for players who want smoother gameplay without a huge drop in visual quality. Combat remains fluid, and the frame rate boost means the game feels responsive and immersive, even in visually busy scenes. Low preset. At the low preset, FSR really ramps up performance, hitting up to 150 FPS on the RTX 3090. This is where FSR shows its strength, significantly improving frame rates while keeping the visuals clean enough for fast-paced action. While textures and fine details appear noticeably softer, the overall image is stable and free from distracting artifacts. This setting is perfect for players who want to prioritize high FPS for competitive or high refresh rate play, but still want a visually decent experience. The smoothness here allows you to fully enjoy Wukong's fast-paced combat and dynamic movements without feeling held back by performance drops. XESS, Intel's Xe Super Sampling, performance at 1080p, cinematic preset. Starting with Intel's XESS technology at the cinematic preset, the RTX 3090 delivers frame rates between 50 and 60 FPS. XESS is Intel's answer to NVIDIA's DLSS and AMD's FSR, employing AI-driven temporal reconstruction to upscale images with impressive speed and clarity. At this highest preset, the image quality is decent, but not without some flaws. While details like character textures and environmental effects maintain good overall clarity, there are occasional shimmering effects and minor artifacting during motion-heavy sequences. These visual quirks tend to pop up when the camera or characters move quickly, manifesting as flickers or subtle distortions around edges and fine details. However, despite these small imperfections, XESS manages to keep the gameplay visually coherent and smooth, ensuring that immersion isn't severely impacted. High preset. On the high preset, frame rates rise to a solid 80 FPS, improving responsiveness and fluidity for more intense combat scenarios. The image quality at this level strikes a reasonable balance. Some of the shimmering and artifacting seen at cinematic are reduced, but not fully eliminated. Visual sharpness remains good enough to appreciate the intricate details on Wukong's weapons and the richly detailed backgrounds, though it doesn't quite match the clarity of DLSS or NXSR. XESS's temporal nature helps maintain smooth animations and reduces aliasing effects effectively, which keeps the action looking polished and the world feeling immersive. This preset is a great choice for those who want playable performance with good visuals on the RTX 3090 without pushing hardware too hard. Low preset. Finally, the low preset unleashes the RTX 3090's power, pushing frame rates up to around 140 FPS in most scenes, especially in open environments. Here, the upscaler favors performance over visual fidelity, so some softness and minor artifacting remain, but are less noticeable thanks to the sheer frame rate. Gameplay feels extremely responsive and buttery smooth, ideal for players using high refresh rate monitors or those who prioritize performance in combat-heavy sections. The image is stable, and the upscaling manages to retain enough detail to keep the world visually appealing even while maximizing speed. XESS at low is perfect if you want to get the most out of your RTX 3090 for Black Myth Wukong without sacrificing too much clarity. Upscalers are crucial in this game, and the RTX 3090 handles them all with surprising ease at 1080p. At 1440p, the GPU has to push more pixels, but let's see how it fares. DLSS performance at 1440p. Cinematic preset. At 1440p with DLSS enabled, the RTX 3090 delivers a solid 40 to 60 FPS range. This resolution increase naturally puts more strain on the GPU, especially with all the rich details and demanding effects turned up to cinematic levels. While gameplay remains generally smooth and very playable, you may notice occasional frame dips during some of the more intense action scenes, like large enemy encounters or sequences with heavy particle effects. Despite these performance hits, DLSS keeps the visuals impressively sharp. Character models maintain crisp edges, and the environmental textures stay detailed, preserving the game's stunning artistic design. Motion stays fluid during combat, making each dodge and strike feel responsive even under the hood's heavier workload. High preset. On the high preset at 1440p, frame rates climb comfortably into the 80 to 90 FPS range, hitting an excellent balance between visual fidelity and performance. Many of the most demanding effects are dialed back here, but DLSS ensures that image clarity remains high. The sharper anti-aliasing smooths out jagged edges, and textures maintain a detailed look without noticeable softness. This setting is ideal for players who want to enjoy Black Myth Wukong's immersive world without compromising smooth gameplay. With frame rates consistently near or above 90 FPS, the RTX 3090 provides a fluid experience well-suited for high refresh rate monitors, delivering buttery smooth combat and exploration sequences. Low preset. At the low preset, the RTX 3090 really flexes its power, pushing frame rates to 140 FPS and beyond. This setting trims down some of the visual effects significantly, focusing on pure performance. However, DLSS's AI-driven upscaling keeps the image quality clean and reasonably sharp despite these cutbacks. The gameplay is ultra-smooth, with near-perfect frame pacing and no stutters. This is the sweet spot for competitive or high refresh rate play, where responsiveness is paramount. Even though some finer details may be softened or scaled back, the overall experience remains highly immersive and visually satisfying. TSR, Epic's Temporal Super Resolution. Performance at 1440p. Cinematic preset at 1440p using Epic's Temporal Super Resolution. TSR. With the cinematic preset, the RTX 3090 delivers a steady 40 to 60 FPS. While this is a bit lower than 1080p, it's still very playable given the increased resolution and heavy visual effects. TSR, being Unreal Engine 5's native upscaling solution, integrates seamlessly with Black Myth Wukong, preserving much of the game's stunning detail and lighting effects. However, at this higher resolution and preset, you'll occasionally notice ghosting artifacts. These show up as faint trails behind fast-moving objects or characters during rapid camera pans or combat sequences. This temporal artifacting is a trade-off for TSR's efficient frame reconstruction, but generally does not detract too much from gameplay immersion. High preset. Dropping down to the high preset improves performance to around 80 to 90 FPS. Here, the visual quality is dialed down slightly to ease the GPU load, reducing some post-processing effects and shadows while maintaining solid detail levels. Ghosting effects become less apparent, but can still be noticed if you look closely during high-motion moments. The overall image remains crisp enough to enjoy the beautifully designed environments, and the smooth frame rate makes combat and exploration feel fluid and responsive. This setting is great for gamers looking for a middle ground between performance and visual fidelity on 1440p displays. Low preset. On the low preset, TSR enables the RTX 3090 to reach an average of 120 FPS, which is excellent for competitive or high refresh rate gaming scenarios. The image does lose some of the cinematic polish, with lighting and shadow detail reduced, but the frame pacing is extremely stable. Ghosting artifacts are minimized here due to the lighter rendering load, which results in cleaner visuals during fast action sequences. This preset is ideal if you want smooth and responsive gameplay at 1440p without sacrificing too much clarity or immersion. NXSR, New Experimental Super Resolution by Game Science. Performance at 1440p. Cinematic preset at 1440p with NXSR enabled on the cinematic preset, the RTX 3090 delivers frame rates between 40 and 60 FPS. This makes the game perfectly smooth for story-driven moments and exploration, where visual fidelity is key. NXSR, Game Science's own experimental upscaling solution designed specifically for Black Myth Wukong, uses a combination of spatial and temporal techniques to reconstruct frames with minimal aliasing and stable clarity. The visuals here feel polished and immersive, with detailed character models, intricate textures, and fluid animations. Although not as sharp as DLSS in some scenarios, NXSR holds its own well, offering a consistent and artifact-minimized experience that preserves the cinematic atmosphere without compromising smooth gameplay. High preset. Switching to the high preset, the RTX 3090 achieves a steady average of around 100 FPS. This setting strikes a great balance, delivering both strong performance and impressive visual clarity. The sharpness improves slightly compared to cinematic, with anti-aliasing that smooths out jagged edges and maintains texture details on Wukong's armor and environmental elements. Gameplay remains fluid during combat and traversal, with minimal frame dips even in demanding areas. NXSR performs admirably here, providing a crisp image that complements the 1440p resolution well. Low preset. On the low preset, the RTX 3090 pushes NXSR performance up to approximately 130 FPS. This high frame rate is perfect for fast-paced action or players with high refresh rate monitors looking for smooth responsiveness. Although some visual details are dialed back to prioritize speed, NXSR continues to deliver clean images with minimal shimmering or artifacts. The game feels buttery smooth, and the overall experience balances speed and quality impressively. For those who want to get the most out of their RTX 3090 at 1440p, NXSR at low is a surprisingly strong option considering it's still labeled experimental. FSR, Fidelity FX Super Resolution, performance at 1440p. Cinematic preset. At 1440p with AMD's Fidelity FX Super Resolution, FSR, enabled on the cinematic preset, the RTX 3090 produces frame rates ranging between 30 and 50 FPS. This makes the game playable even during the most visually demanding sequences, but the higher resolution paired with FSR's spatial upscaling comes with some compromises in image clarity. You'll notice a noticeable loss in sharpness compared to DLSS or NXSR, with textures appearing softer and some fine details on characters and environments losing their crispness. Edges aren't as well defined, and distant objects may look a bit blurred. Despite these drawbacks, FSR maintains stable frame pacing and a generally smooth gameplay experience. The performance boost at this setting helps keep the action fluid, even if the visuals aren't as polished as other upscaling methods. High preset. Dropping down to the high preset, the RTX 3090 pushes FSR to deliver an average of around 80 FPS. Here, the balance between performance and visual quality improves somewhat, but the softness remains noticeable. The game still looks good, especially during fast-paced combat and exploration sequences, but you lose some of the finer visual details and sharp edges that are more apparent in DLSS or NXSR. The lighting and shadow quality also take a hit, which contributes to the overall impression of a less crisp image. However, the frame rate boost makes gameplay very smooth and responsive, making this a solid choice for players wanting more consistent performance at 1440p. Low preset. Finally, on the low preset, FSR lets the RTX 3090 reach about 130 FPS, offering excellent performance for competitive play or high refresh rate monitors. While the visual fidelity drops further here, with more noticeable blurring and a general softening of textures, FSR still keeps the game running smoothly without major distracting artifacts. The upscaler does a good job preserving color accuracy and overall image stability, so even at this performance-focused setting, Black Myth Wukong remains immersive and enjoyable. For those prioritizing frame rates over the highest visual quality at 1440p, FSR Low is a very effective option. XESS, Intel's X Super Sampling, performance at 1440p. Cinematic preset, running Intel's XESS at 1440p on the cinematic preset, the RTX 3090 delivers frame rates between 40 and 60 FPS. This is noticeably lower and less consistent compared to other upscalers at this resolution and setting. XESS relies heavily on AI-driven reconstruction and temporal data, but at higher resolutions and maximum detail, it struggles a bit with maintaining stable frame pacing. You might observe occasional frame drops or stutters during complex scenes, especially when there's rapid movement or intense particle effects. Visually, XESS at cinematic still manages to retain a good level of detail, though it's not quite as crisp as DLSS or NXSR. Some shimmering and minor artifacting can be spotted, particularly on fine edges and dynamic lighting effects, which can be distracting if you're looking for pixel-perfect fidelity. High preset. On the high preset, frame rates improve to around 80 FPS, offering a smoother gameplay experience with fewer dips. The visual fidelity remains decent, but XESS still doesn't quite match the sharpness or consistency of other upscalers like DLSS. That said, the image quality here is acceptable for most players, with a fair balance of clarity and performance. The game runs fluidly through combat and exploration, with only occasional minor visual artifacts. This setting works well if you want a good mix of decent visuals and playable frame rates at 1440p without pushing the hardware too hard. Low preset. At the low preset, XESS performance rises to around 120 frames per second, delivering a smooth and responsive experience ideal for fast-paced gameplay or high refresh rate monitors. The visual quality does take a hit, with more noticeable softness and artifacting, but the upscaler maintains enough detail to keep the game world immersive. Despite its limitations, XESS at low is a viable option for those prioritizing performance at 1440p while still wanting the benefits of AI upscaling technology. At 1440p, DLSS and NXSR are the top-tier options, giving the 3090 enough headroom to breathe. Time to crank the FPS even higher using frame generation at 1080p. TSR, Epic's temporal super resolution plus frame generation. With TSR and FG enabled, frame rates jump to an impressive 80 to 100 FPS at the most demanding cinematic preset. TSR itself is known for its strong balance of image quality and smoothness, and adding frame generation here pushes performance well beyond what TSR alone achieves. The RTX 3090 handles the AI inference effortlessly, providing buttery smooth motion even in hectic boss fights and fast camera pans. Visual quality remains solid with minor ghosting, but the responsiveness gain outweighs this. NXSR, New Experimental Super Resolution by Game Science, plus frame generation. NXSR combined with frame generation at cinematic settings pushes Black Myth Wukong to around 130 frames per second. Developed by Game Science specifically for this title, NXSR offers slightly better anti-aliasing than Epic's TSR, and when paired with frame generation, it delivers a noticeably sharper image with minimal artifacts. Frame pacing is extremely stable, and motion remains fluid even during the most visually intense moments. This makes for excellent visual fidelity, especially during cinematic sequences and story-driven gameplay, where both clarity and smoothness are critical. FSR, Fidelity FX Super Resolution plus frame generation. FSR combined with frame generation at cinematic settings achieves frame rates around 100 FPS. While FSR is less sharp than DLSS or NXSR, the addition of frame generation smooths out motion and improves overall fluidity. The RTX 3090 provides enough power here to maintain a stable and immersive experience despite some softness in texture details. Frame generation makes a massive difference. At 1080p, it turns the RTX 3090 into an absolute powerhouse. Let's push those pixels and still keep it buttery smooth at 1440p. TSR, Epic's temporal super resolution plus frame generation. At 1440p, with TSR and frame generation active, the RTX 3090 achieves a solid 90 FPS average on cinematic settings. TSR provides a great foundation with its temporal upscaling method, maintaining good image quality with only slight ghosting during rapid movement. Frame generation helps double the perceived frame rate, making animations feel buttery smooth and drastically reducing input lag. It's ideal for narrative-heavy scenes where visuals remain rich, but you still want fluidity in camera movement and character animation. NXSR, New Experimental Super Resolution by Game Science, plus frame generation. NXSR plus frame generation at 1440p, cinematic settings pushes the frame rate slightly higher, landing around 100 FPS. It offers enhanced anti-aliasing that sharpens edges and reduces shimmering more effectively, making it a top-tier choice for players who value image clarity. Paired with frame generation, the experience is seamless. Fluid motion, crisp visuals, and excellent stability combined for immersive gameplay that doesn't compromise on either quality or speed. FSR, Fidelity FX Super Resolution, plus frame generation. FSR combined with frame generation at 1440p, cinematic settings delivers roughly 80 FPS. While FSR may fall short of the sharpness offered by NXSR or TSR, It benefits considerably from the additional frames provided by FG. This keeps gameplay smooth and responsive, even if some fine details and edge clarity are slightly diminished compared to higher quality upscalers. Bottom line, frame generation at 1440p ensures the RTX 3090 doesn't just keep up, it leads. Ray tracing is one of the most demanding visual features in modern games, simulating realistic lighting, reflections, and global illumination that truly elevate immersion. In Black Myth Wukong, ray tracing enhances the rich environments, detailed character models, and dynamic combat scenes. Running ray tracing on the RTX 3090 at 1080p with DLSS set to quality is a perfect balance between visual fidelity and smooth performance. Very high ray tracing plus DLSS quality. Starting with very high ray tracing and DLSS quality enabled, expect frame rates hovering around 20 to 30 FPS. This setting delivers stunning, nearly photorealistic reflections on water and surfaces, crisp shadows that react dynamically to light sources, and realistic global illumination that brings the mystical world to life. DLSS quality helps retain sharp details and clarity, keeping textures and character models looking pristine even during fast motion sequences. Medium ray tracing plus DLSS quality. Dropping ray tracing to medium while keeping DLSS quality active, frame rates improve to around 40 to 50 FPS. The visuals still benefit from realistic lighting and reflections, but the reduced workload allows the RTX 3090 to maintain more consistent frame pacing. Medium RT settings keep the magic of dynamic shadows and ambient lighting, which is especially noticeable during combat and exploration. DLSS quality balances visual fidelity with smoothness, keeping the game crisp and responsive, making this a great option for players seeking a strong middle ground. Low ray tracing plus DLSS quality. On the low ray tracing preset with DLSS quality, frame rates climb to 50 to 60 FPS, providing very smooth gameplay with most of the ray tracing effects still intact. While some details like reflections and shadow resolution are reduced, the overall atmosphere remains rich and engaging. This setting is excellent for those who want the next-gen lighting enhancements, but prefer ultra-fluid performance for combat-heavy sequences or fast movement. DLSS quality continues to enhance image sharpness and reduce any blur or artifacts, maintaining an immersive visual experience. Moving up to 1440p resolution, ray tracing becomes significantly more demanding on the GPU, even for a powerhouse like the RTX 3090. However, with DLSS set to quality, the game remains surprisingly playable across all ray tracing presets, with each delivering a unique balance of visual fidelity and performance. Very high ray tracing plus DLSS quality. Starting with very high ray tracing at 1440p paired with DLSS quality, expect frame rates around 20 to 30 FPS. While this is below the ideal 60 FPS threshold for ultra-smooth gameplay, it still provides an incredibly immersive experience for slower-paced exploration or story-driven segments. The detailed reflections on water, glass, and metallic surfaces remain jaw-dropping, with realistic shadowing and global illumination that add depth and atmosphere. Every flicker of light and shadow in the mythical world is rendered with precision, making this setting perfect for taking in the scenery and appreciating the game's artistry, but less ideal for fast-paced combat where frame dips might impact responsiveness. Medium ray tracing plus DLSS quality. Stepping down to medium ray tracing at 1440p, frame rates rise significantly to around 30 to 40 FPS, which is much more suited to action-heavy moments and combat. This preset still provides excellent ray-traced shadows and reflections, capturing the essential elements that define Black Myth Wukong's atmospheric lighting. The dynamic lighting effects still pop, with the DLSS quality mode maintaining crisp visuals, minimal artifacts, and stable motion. This medium setting offers a great compromise, delivering most of the ray tracing enhancements while allowing the RTX 3090 to sustain solid performance in demanding scenes. Low ray tracing plus DLSS quality. On the low ray tracing preset with DLSS quality, frame rates reach a smooth 40 FPS average, unlocking a great balance between visual quality and fluid gameplay at 1440p. The ray tracing effects here are more subtle but still appreciable, with softened reflections and shadows that retain the game's moody ambiance. This setting works well for players who want the benefits of next-gen lighting without sacrificing speed or input responsiveness. DLSS quality ensures that textures and character details remain sharp, even during fast camera movements and intense combat sequences, keeping gameplay immersive and visually rich. DLSS does the heavy lifting here, and even with ray tracing, the 3090 doesn't give up. Is the RTX 3090 still enough for Black Myth Wukong in 2025? The short answer? Absolutely. While the RTX 4090 and newer GPUs exist, the 3090 still handles one of the most advanced Unreal Engine 5 games at high resolutions and settings with competent frame rates. Upscalers and FrameGen breathe new life into this beast, proving that it's not obsolete, it's just matured. At both 1080p and 1440p, the RTX 3090 can still deliver smooth, competitive, and cinematic experiences. If you already own one, there's no need to panic about upgrading, unless you're chasing 4K Ultra at 144 Hz. For most players, the 3090 is still king. Thanks for watching this in-depth benchmark of Black Myth Wukong. If you made it this far, you're a legend. Let me know in the comments what game you'd like to see next. Hit that like button, smash subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the most honest PC benchmarks on YouTube. Until next time, peace out and keep fragging.